Hi, and warm welcome to this book launch of Designing Missions, a practice guide by Vinnova. My name is Anneli Mark, and I will guide you through this event today, where we will get to hear more about the work done at Vinnova with missions. We will meet experts who have conducted missions-oriented innovations and have real projects here in Sweden. And then we have an offer talk with Dan Hill. In the end of this event, the book will be launched on our website and free to download. And this book launch today is, of course, all about missions, a somewhat new way of working to meet social challenges. When working with missions, different actors gather around a boldly inspiring and measurable objective. And since the challenges we face today are both global and complex, we now know that individual efforts are not enough, and change is required on a system level. We must think and cooperate in new ways. And this we need to do fast in order to achieve a sustainable future in time. And a mission-oriented approach is one new way that can create the conditions for systematic change and lead the way. Something we will hear more about on this event today. But now we will start off by kicking off this event with Vinnova's General Director, Daja Isaksson, who will give her view of the importance of working with missions and also her hopes going forward.
Hi. The health, resilience, and prosperity of our societies demand that we act according to what science is clearly telling us, that we're working towards hard deadlines now, deadlines set by the planet. We must transform every value chain, every city, every consumption pattern to lie safely within planetary borders, and we need to do so in a socially sustainable way in a world that's complex and changing every day. In order to succeed, we need science, innovation, and markets directed towards solving these challenges. And in order to achieve that, we need to innovate, how we listen, learn, and act together. Mission-oriented practices help us do just that. Helps us identify common ambitious goals for societal outcomes, enable us to draw on each other's perspectives, each other's knowledge and resources and capabilities, building portfolios of interventions designed to make a difference, designed to enable transformative change. Professor Mariana Mazzucato established the concept and theory of mission-based research and innovation, and it is now being explored and implemented at scale by the European Commission. And as the Swedish innovation agency Vinnova, we've been using the last couple of years as an opportunity to test missions on the ground via a series of pilots and related activities. Today, we're eager to show our workings, to encourage our partners and others to adapt, and continue to evolve the principles and practices that we're now describing in our missions playbook. Of course, there is no silver bullet and there is no perfect process, but there is learning and there is practice. So at Vinnova, we will continue to learn and to develop our practice. And today I just want to say a warm and heartfelt thank you to all of you generously sharing your time, your resources, your insight into this work. We all hope now that these lessons and these shared examples can be of value for others, that others can also develop further so that we continue to strengthen our common ability to address the challenges of our time together. Thank you.
Thank you, Daria, for that message. And mission-oriented approach aims to achieve system change through participation and demonstration, where the most important part is to gather actors from different sectors, industries, and disciplines to work together towards inspiring and ambitious goals. And now we will hear more about how that can actually be like working with this method on the ground. Because as Daria just said, over the past year, Vinnova has worked intensively with missions, testing and learning. And we have so far been in an exploratory phase and in a dialogue with many actors. And joining me now in the sofas, I have my colleagues from Vinnova who worked with missions work. Welcome, Joanna Franzén, Strategic Lead Sustainable Food at Vinnova.
Thank you.
And Filip Kjellgren, Chief Strategy Sustainable Mobility at Vinnova.
Thank you.
How are you feeling today?
Oh, excited.
Yes.
This is a
Super
big
excited.
moment.
It's a big day. Yeah. Okay, so Philip, I want to start off with asking you about how it has been working with missions-oriented approach at Vinnova. Because I guess, as Daria said, then also, as we know, it's a pretty new type of method, so we didn't have a guideline or maybe something to go from in the start.
Exactly. So unfortunately, there weren't any guidebook or mission for dummies, right? So we had to start some extremely, challenging but equally rewarding journey together. And actually, when we start this, we did so many workshops with many actors throughout Sweden. And the first thing that happened when we met them was that they asked, okay, so where's the call text? And how much money do you have? And we answered, whoa, this is not this kind of process. So this is something new. We're going to work together with you. And of course, it's so hard to change an existing system where people view you as an actor and an agency, and we're going to change that role. So it took quite a long time before they started actually understanding that we're not just a funding agency. We're something else in this matter. So I think for me, that was the single most challenging to convey that message to them.
And Joanna, do you agree with the picture that Philip kind of points out here, and also how the differences between, Vinnova, we are usually used to working with challenges, and here it was more versus the missions approach, that is a somewhat a different part.
Yeah, I agree. I think the recognition of us being one of the players and one of the needed actors to change and be part of the change was a very different way for me at least to work, much closer to the actual action and being part of the ball, so to speak. And as Philip said, it was some expectations on us in the food system as well, on providing money and calls and project funding, which is now part of what we do, but wasn't at that time. And of course, when you try to give a new impression of who you are, it takes a bit of time and effort. But I think the response we got and the partners and the networks that we've built together with the actors being part of these workshops has been very rewarding. And I think when it comes to the thing of challenges and missions, it's very close. But one difference is the need for directionality that we see. We see a lot of good and fantastic things being done in projects aiming for solving challenges, but we need to add something as an innovation agency when it comes to directionality and help the actors to reach other important policy makers to get to that point, to actually get the change moving.
Yeah. And if I may just add on that, what you're saying there, Joanna, is so crucial, because to bring these people and these initiatives together, because they weren't actually aware of themselves and each other, so to say. So just that knowledge of them knowing of each other and working together, because we're extremely good at starting new things at Vinnova, and we're not equally as good in joining things together. So I think that is also something new, that we're trying to not just create new, but also bring things together that are already existing and good.
So you felt that they were actually a little bit surprised also by how this whole exercise was for them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think so.
We will get to hear also
some
of them actually in a bit how their experience was. So, but that's interesting to hear. That was new for us. It was also new for the actors. So it's really a testing and learning phase, and it's so important to be open about that. But moving a little bit over also to hear something about what we actually have done throughout this year. I want to ask you, Philip, you have been leading the missions work around the mobility area. Could you share something about what we did, what did we do, and results on the way?
Absolutely. I'll be glad to do that. I think I have some slides here. Yeah, yes, perfect. Yeah. So this picture that we're looking at is a result. The words is a result of a rather long period of time of working together with the players and the actors out in the system. So this is our attempt of creating a mission for Sweden, that every street in Sweden will be healthy, sustainable, and full of life. Because that gives that directionality of, bringing all the good forces and all the good projects together towards that beacon. And during this exercise, we of course started some new things. And if I can get the next slide, please. So this is one of the initiatives that are in this mission of the street, the transformed use of the space between the buildings. This is one project, just one, and it's called Street Moves. And as you can see, it has been extremely high media coverage. And you might think that it's so super easy. What it comes down to in the project, it just removes a couple of parking spots and get that space to be co-created together with the inhabitants around those parking spots. What would they like on them instead of just a parked car? And you might think that it's such a simple idea, and it has been done throughout the world for sure, but it still gained this much attention. And if you can go to the next slide, please, we can see how it looked in real world. So this was timber-made products that were versatile, and you can adapt them to any municipality. And that's super crucial part of this endeavor, that everything that we develop together with the system should be scalable throughout all the 290 municipalities in Sweden and hopefully elsewhere as well. So this journey has been super fun to be part of, and it's continuing. And we're going to hear today, hopefully, that it's still going on.
Great. And how many actors were approximately together, like doing this project?
I think this project, was like 10 actors, different, both from suppliers and municipalities and agencies. And the really crucial part was the partnership that we created together with Arctis, who's another sister agency, so to speak, that we created a partnership with. And that's super important because we can't do everything. We need good partnerships.
I really like the sentence of the gaps between buildings. Like, that's also zooming out a lot to talk about that instead of just how can we talk only on the street, and we're seeing it as a bigger picture. Interesting, Philip. Great, thank you so much for sharing that. And Joanna, to move over to you, you've been leading the other area that we've been focusing on around food. Shortly, what has been the journey and the main results we have seen there? Has it been a similar amount of actors, etc.?
I think in amounts of actors and process it's been quite like, but the starting point is very different. Mobility is an area which Vinnova has been very engaged in for a long time, and food has not had that place in our work before. We've funded a lot of projects and done fantastic things, but not collected as a group or around a team. So when we started this, it was very much about exploring what would Vinnova's role, what it could be in the food system, what could we do, and how could we, together with the actors in the system, frame that and find that position that could make a difference with our tools and abilities. So we started with very little, and now we have quite a big area, I think, and a good network and lots of fantastic partners and interesting projects going on, and developing new calls and new types of working with missions as well. So the journey has been intense and very rewarding, I think.
And one of the end results is also, isn't it, that we also have a more focus on Vinnova now on the food area, which is you're leading the food.
Yes.
Food, a specific area on Vinnova where we focus on food.
Yes.
And sustainable food.
Yes, it's a big result from this work, I think, that we could prove that Vinnova had a role to play in the food system in Sweden.
Great, and we also have a film, but before we look at that from the food case, what would you say, I mean, for you two who've been working at this at Vinnova, what is your, if you would mention one great, like the takeaway that you take from it into future work, Philip, what would you say?
For me personally, it has been extremely educational, and what I always think about nowadays and going forward is not just funding tech, right? So this has been so revelating for me as an individual, because I've been funding a lot of tech stuff. And this work has been more into the other aspects of innovation. So behavioral, policy, norms, legislation, and so forth. So that is something that I really bring forward in the rest of the work,
Thank you. And Joanna?
I think I picked something up just before we started that Dan said about starting is about starting. And I think that is quite good because it's so easy to rely on researching and asking, is this the right way to do this? And what is the actual issue and problem? And do we know everything we need to know? But if you just start, just get out there and try to do something, you will get a lot of answers, and you will get a lot of partners that are willing to help and give you the knowledge that you lack. You can never know everything, but there's a lot of experts that can help.
It's so true. It's really about not having if we started talking about not having the book or the guide in the beginning, but actually being a little bit open, or a lot of open maybe, and also willing to try and start.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Joanna and Philip. And I know now we will have a short film that represents the food case and kind of what have been happening. So let's watch that movie.
We are facing great challenges when it comes to achieving a healthy and sustainable future. And the world leaders, they have agreed to achieve the sustainability goals. But to achieve them, we have to work in many areas at the same time. And one crucial sector to work with is the food system. Food is the single largest contributor to the challenges we face. And 1/3 of all food produced is wasted. Yet, there are 800 million people that face hunger. At the same time, obesity is one of the biggest health risks in the world. In addition, food production of today contributes hugely to biodiversity loss and emits a large proportion of greenhouse gases.
We will need to transform the entire food system. So, where do we start? Well, look at food in schools. Schools, they cook, they purchase, they serve a huge amount of food. And the eating habits of entire generations are partly forged at school. So school meals provides an opportunity to transform the system as a whole. We need to bring together key players and work together towards shared, bold, and engaging goals. And we need to work in a way that enables us to learn. We do this with the prototypes.
So we want to start early and to get these younger kids curious about eating new food, perhaps unknown to them. For example, plant-based food.
Yes, the whole build-up is trying to make them excited.
Gott. Kul.
As far as we see today, they are very curious and excited about it. So it's great.
Jag tyckte också det var kul och spännande. Jag läste på ett mjölkpaket en gång och då sa det att man kunde vara miljöhjälte, så det ville jag bli det.
Through research and broad engagement, we have identified some areas that could have the greatest effects in achieving the goal. We call them levers. They work in a way that a small shift in a lever will impact multiple aspects of the system. The levers in our school food system includes, for example, to involve students and school staff in developing school meals, or ways to shape and design the school meal environment, or a way of hooking school food into the curriculum.
We've started off with a school restaurant that was very pale, ordinary.
Men det var ganska grått, väldigt vanligt. Alla gråa stolar, gråa bord. Det var en vanlig vardag och det var inte så jättekul.
Istället så åker man kanske någon annanstans till McDonald's eller PKs eller liknande.
And we wanted to make a change and involve the students, and that's been a really big part of this project. They had so many ideas, and ideas that we didn't think of.
Eleverna själva så kommer med förslag i alla årskurser också.
Jag tycker att det är mycket bättre här i matsalen just nu än vad det var förr.
Maten blir typ godare fast det inte är förändring i maten. Så det är väldigt, väldigt fint.
När vi ska göra något sånt här som ska gagna eleverna, så har det viktigaste för mig varit att se till att det har varit ett reellt elevinflytande. Och det känner ju jag att det verkligen har varit här. De är jättestolta av de elever som har medverkat i workshopen som ligger till grund för hur det blev.
We use a mission-oriented innovation approach to align these various aspects in a clear. And our mission is that every child in Sweden eats healthy, sustainable and tasty school food. So the work here from Vallentuna and Karlstad are only 2 out of 10 of the mission's prototypes. Each prototype is designed to target several levers, and since each lever affects multiple parts of the system, this can unlock a kind of ripple effect of interactions on a system level. And given the scale of the school food system, this begins to affect the broader food system behind it.
Nu får man förändring på ett väldigt bra sätt.
Och många fler matgäster har vi haft. Så det känns jätteroligt.
So it's been an exciting progress, and we have still a lot to learn and change, but it happens so fast as well.
Fantastic to see some real results, and this movie, I think, really paints out how it can look like working with a real mission, hands-on. But now we have some new guests in the sofas joining me here. Welcome to this book launch, Designing Missions, a practice guide by Vinnova. I'm saying hello to Anna Gemsell, Strategic Development Officer at Umeå City. Welcome. Steinar Danielsen, Sustainable Lead at Volvo Car Mobility. Erik Hammarström, Head of Business Design at Anthrop. And Anna-Karin Ketell, Sustainable Strategist, Livsmedelsverket. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's so great to have you here. It's a perfect bridge from the conversation with Joanna and Philip. And you have all been part of one or another workshop hosted by Vinnova in this mission work. And now it would be great to hear some more about how it has been and what have happened afterwards and so on. So I'm going to start off by asking you, Anna, after you participated in the workshops, I know you were part of the mobility area and the street moves project that Philip talked about. How have you and Umeå City continued the work afterwards, or have you?
Yes, we have. We really like working with integrated perspectives and co-creation. But I will give you one example of how we work. Imagine your favorite industrial area. How easy is it to go by bus there? It's probably built for men going there by car to their work. So we realized that if we're going to change the travel habits, we need to look deeper. We need to look into the gender perspective and the norms and values that form our choice of travel. So right now we work together with companies and employers to get more information and knowledge about how do they make their choice of travel, and how can we make it easier to go by bus or to travel by bike to work. We think that we really need to go deeper and understand more about what forms the choices. And we hope further on to make some kind of a intervention to try out new methods. How could we facilitate this?
Interesting. It's what Philip talked about, this that innovation is so much more than only having a project around a product or etc. It's also about behaviors and attitudes and understanding these underlying factors. Is this something you feel that was more clear to you after participating in the missions and street moves work, or?
One important with these workshops were meeting different perspectives and stakeholders. So absolutely, it really opened the minds of how we need to work to address these missions.
Interesting. And Steinar, you have also been part of the missions around mobility. How has it been to be participating in this process, and how have you perceived Vinnova in a new way after these collaboration workshops? And
for me, it's been fantastic. It's been an eye-opener, and I think also for us as Volvo Car Mobility, which is about learning about how we can then work with other actors that are part of creating our society in order to be able to change the framework so we can be more sustainable. Obviously, we are one part of that. Our goal is to try to provide access to cars instead of ownership, to reduce the amount of privately owned cars in the streets, and then to be able to do something with that space that's viable to make those cities. We need to work together with others. And what's been insightful for me is that coming in contact with other people, other forums, but also coming in contact with citizens and doing it in that right way, understanding that balance, and then having Vinnova to be acting as a platform to facilitate that discussion, because otherwise, all the different organizations, we would have to try and find that initiative ourselves, and to try and find that platform to have these discussions to push this forward would be almost impossible. So by Vinnova providing that platform in order for us to all come together and collect and to work together with prototyping ways, it was just fantastic.
And having the neutral kind of part, maybe in the sense coming in, having no expectations or agenda points, only to just have a conversation and meet a common goal.
Exactly. I have a hard time trying to find out where else that kind of platform or that kind of forum would happen.
Will you continue in any ways with missions work at Volvo Cars, or how?
And absolutely, we've been working a little bit with Helsingborg as well in developing and continue working with the Street Moves project, but also using that project as an example, that way of working as an example as we go into other cities and move into other areas of how to really make an effect. And I think the biggest effect for me was also that we created the prototypes. When you create a prototype, it just went from becoming a concept and a theory and an idea and a paper product into something which was real and tangible, that people could really see, interact with and touch and see the difference there. And especially when you're talking about something like parking your car, it can be a very sensitive subject to a lot of people if you're taking that away from them. What happened by developing the prototypes, the dialogue shifted about what you're taking away into what you're getting instead. And that really, really helped everybody to understand how our streets can be better by sharing cars, for example.
The power of visualization and actually seeing something. Yes, thank you so much. And moving over to the food area, Anna-Karin, you work at Livsmedelsverket and have been part of the work around the food missions. How have you felt that it's been to be part of the workshops and worked in an area you're very familiar with, but maybe in another context?
I would say the one word that comes to my mind is creativity and creative. It's been such a creative process and fun. And we have really, we are so used to trying to solve problems on our own and the same problems for like 20 or 30 years. And we're still sitting there struggling with them. And we're very good at, dividing up. And this is your problem and this is our problem. And you do that and we do this. But with this approach, we sat down together, not only with other agencies, but with other actors in the system, and trying to solve problems together, and not only solve problems, but actually pointing out what we want to achieve. What's the goal? Where do we want to go? And I think that was a really powerful thing to do.
Did you have any aha moments during the work?
Many. And it's been so interesting all the way. But I really like the visual part of it. We worked with big paper sheets, and we draw and sketched, and that can seem kind of not really serious, but it really was an important part of it. And then also I think one important aspect is the courage to actually take all those sketches and just trying to, boil it down to something really concrete and tangible, and do something with that. Because sometimes we just get stuck with all our problems, but in this case we really took it forward, and that was great.
Not an ordinary meeting, it's something else, it sounds like. And Erik, I'm turning to you now. You work at Antrop, a digital design company. I guess you're rather used to having new methods and ways of working presented to you, but what are your learnings from the missions approach and this work that you've been part of?
There's so many learnings. I think it's been great being part of this whole process, and I think what's really important is this bold missions that sets out a positive future, that you work from that future and you want to define what outcomes you want in that future. That's a really good starting point that helps the dialogue between all these different actors that Anna-Karin talked about, to get them involved and engaged around these topics, and then to get the analysis on where to find the levers in the system, what you want to change. And that's done through workshops and also in-depth interviews and other aspects. But then the other thing is that it's easy when you have a lot of things to analyze, it's easy to get stuck there. So you really want to move from this big analysis and to get action going. And it was been so great getting the municipalities involved as well, doing hands-on prototypes in different schools, in the school kitchens, and also in other parts of the municipalities, in the like the ones buying the food and all the other part, and to get to try things out. So as you saw in the movie, it was like 10 different prototypes, and it's really good to get many different parts and see what works and what does not work, and to get that momentum going.
And not to maybe plan and then test, but like in the movie, it really felt like it was hands-on, it was happening now, and to see the reactions directly. Will Antrop continue working with missions approaches, or is it one of the things in your toolbox, or how do you see it?
Yeah, I think it's a very important part of the toolbox. Connecting this methodology around system analysis and combining it with design thinking. I think that's a really powerful thing of missions, to do that in a good way, to understand these big systems, but then to put it into concrete action.
Great. And I'm turning now to all of you, like if you would say, I mean, to the people listening in, if they're sitting and okay, I'm having this practical guide now in front of me, what's the best advice you would have for someone listening in and thinking of maybe we should try out this missions work? I don't know who want to start, who feels eager. Otherwise I will stay now. You're next. You're closest to me, so you got it.
I would say don't be scared and just jump in and start doing it, because you know even where in some ways you need to trust the process. You need to do that, but hold yourself to it. Jump into it. Don't try to take on and everything at once, but follow the process and challenge yourself throughout that process, and you will get to react. For me, I think it's important to within this missions as well, is that you do drive it into the prototyping work. The process of getting to those prototypes is really important to be able to understand and create those dialogues between the different actors. That is super important, but it shouldn't stop there. It should go into prototypes to continue those dialogues as well. That's the most important thing for me.
Anna?
I would say it's all about encouraging creativity. To be innovative, you need to step outside the box, and as public organizations, we not often work with creativity as a tool. So I think that's a clue.
Yeah, I can really agree, and I think that the outside perspective is really important. So think about if you can involve someone from the outside to actually facilitate the processes. I think that's a great value, and also because of it sets a neutral scene and makes it more easy to think outside the box, and then also of course to involve the users and the people out who actually are acting in the system. That was kind of an eye-opener for me.
Eric?
I think this portfolio approach, I really like that. You don't try to find the perfect idea, the perfect solutions. You will have many different solutions that all contribute towards this more positive future that we want to create. So that you work with many different solutions. I think that's very important.
Great. So it's all about being close to the participants, the user, opening up to creativity, having a neutral part, getting it all together, and just getting started with it. It feels like that's what you're saying here, and it's very valuable to hear your thoughts and how it's been to be part of these workshops. So I say thank you to you, and hopefully you will be able to, if someone listening in want to reach out and hear more about the work, they know where to find you. Thank you so much for joining. And now we will have the next slot of this session, which is to welcome Dan Hill to join me here. And here he is he's on his way up to the sofa. Dan, you are welcome first of all. Welcome to the sofa. And you are somewhat the guest of honor of today in some sense, since you are a huge contributor and also actual author of the book. Mm-hmm. So I need to start off by asking you, how are you feeling today? Now when we're actually on this day of the book launch that you and the team and all of the parts have been working for so long with.
Yeah, it's been a very long time. It's been a very long book to write, a long gestation period, as my colleagues know. I think we started writing this as we were going, which was probably a bad idea in retrospect, in terms of getting something done, but a good idea in terms of capturing, I think, what you just heard about. And how do I feel about that? I'm really proud, actually. I'm really feeling, okay, my job here is done. These guys absolutely nailed it in terms of the kind of methods and lessons you might take from this. So I'm delighted to see not just the work, but the way that people are talking about it. And we had to figure that out together. I think, as Philip said, there was no pre-existing guidebook we could use here. We knew that we wanted to test this idea of missions. We have a responsibility to do that as the innovation agency, to try these new methods. And we took this kind of learning by doing approach to it, which again made a book very hard to write, but it was the right thing to do. And so I think you can hear probably in what you just heard, the impact on the ground was something we tried to get to as quickly as possible. So not to try and write a book to figure out what to do, but to do something and then use the book to sort of capture it, almost like a vapor trail, you know, sort of
like a diary of the work.
Yeah, that would have been a better thing to do in retrospect.
But maybe this is a type of a practical diary.
Yeah, well, exactly, and well, it has that kind of ideally that kind of openness to it, and maybe a bit of reflection. So it was a little bit like a diary for me and those involved. What are we doing, and how are we doing it, and what kind of conversation are we having? How is that different to what we did before? We haven't answered all of those questions, but we've tried to put something down that other people can then take and play with themselves, adopt it and adapt it to their own situation. So it's kind of open in that sense. It's not a secret diary. It's a very public diary.
It's supposed to be used. Yeah,
exactly.
But for those who don't know you, you started here at Vinnova 3 years ago. Do you want to tell us something about why Vinnova and what did you hope for when you started and start off this work with missions? Because that was your starting point, right, at Vinnova, to do this missions work. And,
yeah, essentially to start looking at these kinds of what we call strategic design methods that now a lot of the people here, I'm pointing to people in the audience who are my colleagues, had been exploring in different ways, some of them, but then begin to really say, what if we locked that in as a kind of practice? What if we try to do this kind of work, the kind of what you just heard about? So not just being a funding agency. Of course, we continue to be a funding agency. That's one of the primary methods. But to look at this other stuff. What about our convening role, our coordinating role, our collaboration role, us as an actor? How close can we get to the action and learn from it in a responsible way as a public agency? All of those things we wanted to explore together. And that's work that I've been doing throughout my career in different ways. And I did that in Finland, actually, about 10 years ago at Sitra, the Finnish, almost equivalent of Vinnova to some degree, a sovereign innovation fund in Finland. And so I was also interested in this idea of how Nordic countries in particular can do this kind of work. Are they more attuned to public-private collaboration, for instance? We know that's been at the heart of the idea of the Nordic model for a long time, probably 100 years now at least. And so that seems an interesting thing to test and say, how does the Nordic model evolve for the 21st century, given that it achieved all of these things in the 20th century, you know, the 2000s, compared to the 1900s in a way. So that was, from my own sort of selfish perspective, I was interested in saying, well, we did that stuff in Finland, that was interesting, 10 years ago. What would it mean to do that in Sweden now, at this point? Sweden's very different to Finland, of course, but at the same time a kind of a shared idea about the way that a public actor can be. And that was very different to where I was previously in the UK or Australia or Italy, other places I've worked, where you still have government agencies, but not in the same model that we do here at all. So I wanted to test that and explore that with my colleagues again and see how could we begin to carve out an idea of a sort of a 21st century bureaucracy. What would that mean? I think we just heard also from some of our colleagues, you know, the sort of how can we be creative and exploratory and also be public organizations? Those are really interesting questions, I think.
Right. And why the missions approach? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at and work with these methods in public sector. Why missions? And why is it also being talked about so much right now in the world about how to work with a mission approach innovation?
Yeah, I mean, so to some extent that was pragmatic and opportunistic, as in there was a lot of buzz around it, I guess, within the tiny niche world of innovation policy kind of buzz. So we knew that, again, it was something that we should look at on our radar, if you like. And so that was an excuse almost. Let's look at missions as a container, because it was sort of undefined in practice. Mariana and others have done a very good job about defining it as an idea and a possibility. But there weren't that many examples and going, yeah, but how would you actually do that? You know? So that meant that it was kind of open land for us to explore together methodologically. So missions was useful in that respect, because then we can pile lots of different things under that umbrella. So the idea of citizen participation, the idea of prototyping, these are things that not necessarily to do with missions at all. They exist in many other practices for decades, centuries. But the missions gave us an excuse to start bundling those together and say, how do we do top down and bottom up at the same time? How do you do genuinely multidisciplinary? How do you have a North Star, like a directionality, as we heard from Joanna, but without falling into the old trap of roadmaps and planning and doing analysis for 4 years and then assuming that's going to happen, you know? So all of those things were really interesting. And then the second thing is, you know, as you said, why does it resonate? Well, I think we all, in a sense, know that you can't use the methods that got you into this mess to also get you out of them, you know. So we need new approaches for things like the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, social justice crises, health crises, and so on. And yeah, using the same tools to try to fix them is probably not going to work. So I think there's a broad awareness of that at the citizen level, policymakers and others, that we, in a sense, desperately need to find new approaches here. So we had a reason and an excuse at the same time.
But working with now this work throughout the last 1 or 2 years, is there anything that been harder than expected?
Everything. Well, that's not strictly true. There are some things here that I think the Swedish context helps with massively, I would say, like the idea of public-private collaboration. And as we heard, sort of pulling a network of people together, and a sort of a shared idea of we're all in this together and this is a societal outcome around whether it's mobility or food. You know, that was something that we could actually, didn't take me too much effort personally to have to conjure that into life, because that was already sort of baked into the model a little bit. I know that would be very different if it was the UK, for instance, where I'm from. There would be a distrust from the public side about private lobbying and vice versa. Whereas here, I think the state on the public side, commune, region, and agency are well-resourced and, you know, relatively well-respected, I guess, and trusted actors in society. And then you have a very strong private sector and a very strong third sector. So that's very imbalanced elsewhere. So that bit was, I'm answering your question completely the wrong way around, I realize. but that bit was easier on the basis that everything else there was also then, you know, that having got to that point, then there was some quite tricky things. And one thing is the corollary of having a well-resourced public sector is, I'd say, that we have very well-built silos. So I think we heard that a little bit from Anna-Karin and others. It's sort of how we then actually work together as opposed to parceling the problem up. But that was really tricky, I would say. And it's partly as a result of having such a strong sector. You know, the agencies are relatively well-resourced with very clean lines around them. I sometimes think it's like a nice Swedish house with very good insulation, you know. Not much gets through. So having got everybody into the same room, we talked about having these system-in-the-room workshops, how you then genuinely get joint commitment to something like that, like the street we chose specifically, because we have Boverket, a building agency, and Trafikverket, a traffic agency. Who looks after the street? It's like both, neither. It's kind of in between, awkwardly. And so both have responsibilities, but it's not super clear how. So we were trying to find these kind of positions. And that's hard because it's very easy for someone, and I don't blame people, by the way, I'm just to say, well, actually, no, that's not my job, that's another agency's job. And so I think we have to rethink, well, how does that change? When the problem changes, again, you can't use exactly the same structures that got you into the situation. So that bit, I think, is continually hard here. I don't mean in a bad way, I just think that's the job, and that's the challenge. And that's why we saw Vinnova as possibly a place that could be what I sometimes call like the cement between the bricks kind of actor, where we can pull people together and move across the system. So it's hard, but it's super rewarding as well.
Yeah, we also heard it from some of our participants here that it was a good thing that it was a more neutral part having that role.
Yeah, and I think
facilitating and organizing.
Absolute, and you know, Vinnova really has one job in a sense, and it's to make sure that Sweden's innovation systems are fit for purpose. You know, so other than that, there are some sub clauses, but that's kind of it. So we can move across. Whereas some of those other agencies, like the food agency, sort of has to focus on food, quite rightly, you know. So then getting them in the same room as the school agency and saying a bit like with my street example, okay, you're both kind of implicated in school food. How do you do that? Whereas Vinnova, we don't have school interest or food interest or mobility, like we have all of them. In a way, we're interested in all of those things. And so we have to have that. And then neutrality is sometimes a bit hard with directionality. And so sometimes I get this from other countries, or maybe someone listening is thinking, how can you be so clear about the direction? How can you talk about sustainable food, you know, for instance? That's not as clear in other countries. Some other countries might say food is a big industry, that's its main role, or food is about making sure people don't end up in famine, fine. Those are different in different places. But here we could say, well, we have government strategies. We have signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals, the global goals, for instance. That gives us directionality. So then it's a case of how do we get going? How do we? Now our job is to deliver against that kind of. That's done, you know, the goals part. Now it's about delivery.
Great to hear you talk about those things. And now you're actually leaving Vinnova and moving to Melbourne University in Australia. Would you say something short about what would you do there, and also what are the main things you're taking with you from the work from Vinnova over there?
Yeah, sure. And the key words I heard there was say something short, which is
so that was the thing that you.
I know. My colleagues are laughing, going, "Ha ha ha! He'll never be able to do that." So yeah, I'm going to be the head of Melbourne School of Design, which is a graduate school to do with architecture, building, and planning, and so on. So a lot of these questions are in streets and mobility and food and the city. I mean, I only have one or two ideas. It's be testing them there, testing them in Australia. How do we do that? How does a university have a meaningful relationship to the city and get things done and build the same kind of change that we've been able to try to start here? And of course, you know, Australia is very different to Sweden in lots of respects, and so that'll be in good, you know, in positive ways and negative ways at the same time. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to finding out and helping with.
Now you have a guide that you can bring you at least and say like, here we go. Let's start with reading this, everyone.
Exactly, exactly.
See you in a couple of days. But okay.
Do you think that'll work? I don't know. I'll just email it ahead of time and then land and then I'm ready to go.
Exactly. But if to say something more about the experiences that you had during this time, what is especially useful, you think, going forward?
I learned so much here, and again, I go back to I'm just sort of, you know, I was just really delighted to hear my colleagues talking about the work in the way that they did, you know, and finding their own words to describe this kind of activity. That's been really important to me, to work with a great bunch of people here and then figure things out as we go and have the bravery and the intelligence and the skill for them, I mean, not me, to do that. That's been immensely rewarding. So I've learned a ton of stuff here. Some of that will work in Australia, some of it won't.
And if someone, for the people listening in who will actually work with the guide and maybe start doing their work, as I asked the other participants, like what are your best advices for starting off your missions work?
Yeah, read it carefully and then don't read it too carefully. So as in don't think it's a guidebook. You know, it's not like do this, then this, then this, then this, then ta-da. You know, it's more like something that maybe recipe book would have been a nicer word for it in a sense, but just I would love people to read it and then tear pages out and scribble on it and then say, I'm going to try this bit. I'm not going to try that bit because that's not going to work here or whatever. It's a contribution from us at Vinnova as to ask the story about the way that we did this, you know, what we tried to do here. We wanted to share that with as many people as possible to learn from it as a reflective process. You know, I think the writer Joan Didion once said, I write things down to figure out what I think. And I think that's in a way what we tried to do, is like make the book to figure out what did we do here? And then how do we communicate that to others so that we can have a conversation about it, see what they do with similar ideas or their own ideas, and then we'll learn in return. So yeah, don't think of it as an instruction manual at all. It's more a set of stories and ideas and thoughts and principles and things to be tested wherever you are.
And with that said, we are about to wrap up this book launch, but we will say something more, of course, about the continuous work here at Vinnova and how we will work with it. And to help us do that, we will now be joined also by our colleague Jenny Ellsberg, Head of Innovation Management Division at Vinnova. So welcome, Jenny, to the sofa. And Jenny, you heard everything that's been said here today. And what do you see is the next step for Vinnova? Maybe I would say Sweden for working with this book now when it's launched. And we have had some experiences about using a missions-oriented approach.
Well, the next step is for sure for Sweden to download the free version. And then we at Vinnova, you know, this is such a beautiful event because I can see all the colleagues here so proud of the work that has been done. And what I want to say is that this is not, we haven't learned something and we're done. We have, it's almost like having a personal trainer when you learn, I don't know, box jumps or something. So now we've done leaving, we need to continue the practice. We need, I mean, this is it's like a muscle that we need to continue working with. And also we have a lot of actors in the Swedish system that have picked this up in their ways and all that. So I hope we can make Sweden I mean, we are in this together and now mission-oriented, we can actually go after that Agenda 2030 targets and do it together. I mean, it's a complex system. It won't happen by the silos alone.
And how do you think it can be used more widely? And I asked this also to you, Dan, but first, Jenny, how can we? Okay, now we have the book. You can download it. We have some use cases, but how can we actually get it going more widely?
I think we have a responsibility at Vinnova because we have practiced and learned together with actors. So I guess we have to help anyone being anxious, you know, come there, be that platform and actually help them to get going. So I mean, we don't look at the system, we are part of the system. So I think that is really important. And then I love what you said about, you know, use the book and pick some pages, but not all of them. And then somehow have the conversation going, because we all want to go after a very important goal in a very complex system that we call the world. It's and as it has already been said, we are already started. Let's keep going.
What would you say then?
Yeah, I'm happy that Joanna picked up on the thing I said about start by starting, really. And we know we have a tendency on the policy making side. We were just talking about this beforehand, actually, with a few colleagues to say, but can you give me all of the analysis beforehand? Like, what will happen? You know, and we, you know, the world should tell us by now, the last few weeks, the last few years, that you make plans and roadmaps, and then things happen, and you have to turn them up. And so, it's much better to get into, in my mind anyway, this more agile, engaged, exploratory approach. Start something and start learning, as opposed to trying to build the answer beforehand. I know this sounds incredibly common sense, but if you think about it, you know, I really like this quote from Donella Meadows, who's the guru of, or was the guru of systems thinking, you know, and she says, really, you can't know leverage points, as she calls them, in advance. You know, you just can't. You have to get in there and start something. I'm paraphrasing. And you have to let go. She talks about profoundly, madly letting go. And then we think about, yeah, but when have you ever heard a policymaker or a politician say, I don't know? Or we're just going to let go? Or we're going to see what happens? You know, it's like, and I applaud them if they do that, because I think that's more honest, and I think that's smarter as well, actually, because it would be a more responsible way. We're going to stay involved, stay engaged with the thing. We're going to work it from within. We're going to work together and build this together. And my friend Jakob pointed out, you know, this is, Sweden's done this before in 1920, 1930. It's not like someone gave a report to people and said, okay, here's how you get from one of the poorest countries in Europe to one of the wealthiest in one generation. Just do this, 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 you know. It was a hugely mission-like approach. Lots of activities, top down, bottom up, across the country, every single thing. And the welfare state and the Nordic model was conjured out of all of that experimentation in a very, very interesting way. So we have that, I say we, you guys, have that in the DNA. It's there, you know. But we've somehow gone into this mode where we've said, no, but you must tell me the answer. Where has this been done before? Or what about the numbers, you know? And that isn't really how it works, as we know. So we have to kind of hold that, I think, and start by starting.
And it feels like it's all down to an attitude and behaviorally looking at it in a different aspect and being more willing to, as we talked about before, creative, open-minded, and starting the dialogue somewhere and just doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's challenging, and but if you've been involved in innovation, I know you've been involved in innovation very much, that's what that work actually looks like, doesn't it? It's sort of, it's not being afraid of risk, it's actually taking a risk, doing it in a responsible way by being engaged and managing the risk from within. But it involves that kind of step into the unknown. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you so much, Jenny. And with that said, I actually think it's time to launch this book, because now we talked about it for 1 hour and I feel that it's actually time to do this. So Dan and Jenny, are you ready to launch this book? Yes. I think we're having actually a download, because since the book is going to be available to download, we will now count down from 10 and then you will be able to download the book and start working with the missions. So let's do this. Okay, so I think we're going to have a countdown. And it will be here. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh my God.
Way.
That is the most extravagant way I've seen someone copy a file onto a server.
Yeah.
How it should be done.
So I can see all of you home now sitting there and like, oh, it's here, and having this confetti rain with us and our counting down. It's amazing. It's now out there. It's now launched. Now the work actually begins. So with those words and with this confetti rain, we just want to say thank you so much for listening in, and we really hope you download the book and start by starting. And also that you share your journey and reach out to us if we can help in any way with the missions approached way of working, because it is through collaboration, as we heard today, that we can make real change happen. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.